Hello and welcome to the Federal. The Union Cabinet has today, we are being told, approved two bills for the introduction of its pet project, simultaneous elections. That is, synchronizing the elections of the Lok Sabha with the elections of all state assemblies, as well as the assemblies of different union territories. We are told the details, although are still very sketchy because an official briefing has not happened, but we are being told that another bill that was supposed to come as a follow-up to the synchronizing of the elections for the Assembly and the Lok Sabha, the bill to also synchronize municipal panchayat local body elections has not been approved in today's meeting. If I can take you back to the to the origin of this whole idea in the current context, the government had set up a committee under former President Ramnath Kovind. That committee had examined the aspects of whether simultaneous polls should be rolled out, how they should be rolled out. And in its report, the committee had laid out a two-step procedure. The first step, as per the committee, was to synchronize the elections for the Lok Sabha, state assemblies, and assemblies of union territories. And the second step was to synchronize then the elections for the municipal bodies with the Lok Sabha and state assembly polls. So today, what we are being told by sources in the government is that the Union Cabinet has approved two bills, one to synchronize the elections of all state assemblies with the election for the Lok Sabha, and second, to synchronize the Delhi Assembly as well as other Union Territory Assembly by-elections, assembly elections, and then, of course, synchronizing them with the Lok Sabha and state assemblies. Now, what does this essentially mean? The obvious question that everyone would ask is when would this rollout happen? When would these bills be moved in Parliament? Whether the rollout will happen from 2029 when the next Lok Sabha elections are due. So, from what we are being told, the bills are likely to be moved by the government in the ongoing winter session of Parliament itself, possibly next week. Tomorrow and day after in the Lok Sabha, there is a discussion planned on the Constitution. A similar discussion is to take place in the Rajya Sabha on Monday and Tuesday. We are being told that once these discussions are over, this debate on the Constitution is over, the next step would be, from the government side, would be to bring these bills in Parliament. Most likely in the Lok Sabha is where the government is likely to table these bills. From what our sources are telling us, once these bills are tabled, the government will not try to bulldoze the bill in both houses of Parliament. Instead, the government is willing to recommend these bills for further consultations by a joint parliamentary committee of both houses. So the timeline for the rollout as such will be indeterminate. You cannot say, one cannot say when these simultaneous polls would be rolled out, because once the matter goes to the JPC, if it goes to the JPC will, of course, hold its own deliberations. It will then give its recommendations, and based on which, since the government is very keen on this, the government would then push forward with it as a legislative agenda for being passed, being enacted by Parliament. But there again, the Kovind Committee had given a broad framework of how the rollout is to happen. And what the Kovind Committee had recommended was that once these bills are passed, these bills have to specify what the Coven Committee called an appointed date. Now, what is the appointed date? The appointed date, as per the Coven Committee recommendation, was the first day of a fresh Lok Sabha, of a new Lok Sabha that is constituted. On the very first day of the first session of that Lok Sabha, the president will issue a notification. That date onwards, you count 5 years. So since the current Lok Sabha, this is now the third session. We had the inaugural session in June, followed shortly after by the budget session, and now the current ongoing winter session of Parliament. Since that time of the first day of the first session has lapsed, uh, possibly, we don't know for certain because the government hasn't officially spoken about it. Possibly, the appointed date would be the first day of the next Lok Sabha, the first session of the next Lok Sabha. I stress on the fact that we don't know this for certain, but it's a possibility. So the rollout as of now remains indeterminate. We do not know in what form the bills finally take, what form the bills would take, what the appointed date would finally be. But as of now, the bills at least have been cleared by cabinet to be tabled in Parliament. Now, we've seen over the last 10 years of the Narendra Modi government, uh, multiple bills, very controversial bills, being bulldozed through Parliament. So, an obvious corollary question could be, why can't the government bulldoze through this bill also? The answer is rather simple. These bills are constitution amendments. At least the two bills for synchronizing the assembly elections with the Lok Sabha. I'm not talking about the municipal elections at this point because that bill has also not been given a cabinet approval at the moment. So just these two constitution amendment bills for synchronizing the elections of the assemblies and the assemblies of the union territories with the Lok Sabha. These bills require to be passed by a two-thirds majority of Parliament, of both houses of Parliament, of members present and voting. This June, when the new Lok Sabha was constituted, we saw the numbers of the ruling NDA plummet. And the ruling NDA now has 293 MPs in the Lok Sabha. Its figures in the Rajya Sabha are around 222. In the Lok Sabha, the two-thirds majority mark is 363. That's a figure that the NDA does not have at this point. Similarly, in the Rajya Sabha, if the full strength of the House is present, the two-thirds majority mark would be 160. So getting those numbers for the government would be difficult, which is perhaps the reason why it does not want to bulldoze these bills through Parliament at this point. Because the only other way to do it would be to reduce the number of MPs present and voting in the House to manufacture a two-thirds majority. But that cannot be done under the current circumstances. It was possible, perhaps, in the previous Lok Sabha, the previous two Lok Sabhas, because one, the NDA's numbers were high. Second, the non-aligned parties which are neither part of the NDA nor part of the opposition, what is now called the India Bloc, what was previously called the UPA, non-aligned parties like Mr. Naveen Patnaik's BJD, Mr. Jagan Mohan Reddy's YSRCP, or the Bharat Rashtra Samiti of Mr. K. Chandrasekhar Rao. These parties in previous Lok Sabhas were more accommodating of the BJP's request, which may not be the case at this point. Besides, their numbers in both houses are also not as strong as they used to be. So getting past the 363 two-thirds majority mark in a full house in the Lok Sabha would be very difficult for the BJP. because with 293 members at the moment in the NDA, the government would require nearly 100 odd abstentions, which doesn't look very likely. So this is more in terms of the legislative strength, a compulsion born out of that, that the government perhaps has been compelled to consider sending this to a JPC for further consultations. Of course, once those consultations happen, whether those consultations happen in the true spirit of consultations also remains to be seen, and what shape the bills finally take also remains to be seen. So at this point in time, the big news, of course, is that cabinet approval to the two bills has been granted for synchronizing the elections of the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies and the assemblies of the union territories. Step two, which is also synchronizing the municipal elections, there is no bill on that front at this point. The third aspect of the Kovind committee was also to have a single electoral roll, which means a common electoral roll at the central level, the Lok Sabha elections, as well as the municipal and the state assembly elections. So that also, a bill to enact those changes has also not been approved at this point. Now, both the bills for streamlining, for synchronizing the panchayat, the local body elections, and with the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and the bill for a single electoral roll. Both these bills would also require concurrence, ratification by a majority of state assemblies. So that's another hurdle that the BJP might face, although the BJP, the NDA, has control over nearly 20 assemblies out of the 31 assemblies of states and union territories at this point. So the ratification has to be from a majority of the state assemblies, which of course are in the government's favor at this point. But then whether the non-BJP ruled states, non-BJP led governments, as in NDA governments, which do not have BJP chief ministers. So, for instance, Chandrababu Naidu in Andhra Pradesh, Nitish Kumar in Bihar, the several northeastern states where you don't have a BJP CM, although the parties may be part of the NDA. Whether those states, those parties, those chief ministers wholeheartedly support this move, we do not know at this point in time. So for now, the focus would be on the introduction of these two bills for synchronizing the Lok Sabha and the assembly elections, whether they are referred to a JPC, what the appointed date is likely to be for the rollout of these synchronized elections, and of course the steps that the government takes in terms of the consultation process, the constitution of these committees, how these deliberations are to be conducted. All of those would be interesting to keep an eye out for. But a big step from the government nonetheless. This has been on the agenda of the BJP for a very long time. The government has moved a step closer in realizing that dream of the BJP. And of course, we are seeing a very disruptive session of parliament. This is again an issue that political parties across the spectrum have very strong views on. So when this bill is introduced, we will also get a fair sense of how the opposition reacts to this bill. The opposition has been trying to corner the government during the ongoing session of parliament on multiple issues. This could be another issue that will create further tensions, although the government's willingness to refer this to a joint parliamentary committee should soften the blow for the opposition to some extent, at least on the issue of synchronized polls. We'll wait for more updates on this, but as of now, a big day for the government. a big move by it, a big development nonetheless. And we'll wait and see how this pans out eventually.